What we're looking at right away here is or are the buildings shown in an old film strip. This was around 1930, and that's the look of it now. A woodcut I did some time ago. At one time I worked for the publicity office there, and I did photography on campus for various purposes, and did visual productions of various kinds. That's a woodcut I did. Now that is something I did not do. That was done by T.M. Fowler and Company in 1901. But it gives a good picture of what the place looked like. This is the campus as it looked then, the main part of it. They moved into that in 1889. When the sisters first moved there in the early 1880s, this is what they moved into, this building right here. And that was what it looked like. It was built by Will Stokes, a lawyer, and this is what it looked like in the 1850s, shortly after Will Stokes had built it. And the sisters found it in around 1882 when they bought the property, very much like that, and they put a mansard roof on it. And later it was changed quite a bit, and it's still there, but it's been changed to the degree you hardly ever recognize it. This shows Greensburg and the property that was bought by the sisters, about 200 acres or so, showing Will Stokes' farm and the building that the sisters found when they moved there. And the property was once in the ownership of Ludwig Otterman, who was considered one of the founders of Greensburg. And after Otterman had it, it went through a number of owners until Stokes got it, and the bank then got a hold of it after another owner, and the sisters got it then. And for a good number of years, they ran an academy there, which was what we think of as a high school. And it wasn't until the late teens they got into the college business. And by 1929, this was the size of their graduating class. Certainly nothing compared to the graduating class of today. I did that shot when I worked there. This was the graduating class of 1979. Actually, this was just a very small fragment of it. The graduating class was a lot bigger than that. That was that same day, some of the dignitaries. This takes us back to around 1930. The girls were setting out on a road tour for a debate. They were going to various colleges to let their debating team interact with other debating teams. That was an old Pierce Arrow, big old car. The girls used to call it the Fierce Sparrow. Good. Yes, I know I should have gotten a haircut and a shave before I did this, but sometimes life is what happens. We just saw a little bit of footage from the early days of Seton Hill, and an interesting sidelight on all that is when the sisters first arrived there from Altoona, they wanted to buy the place. They had a loan offered to them, but the bishop would not allow them to take the loan out. He was worried about the money. He was worried that they wouldn't be able to pay it back. However, in the meantime, the bishop took off on a trip for Rome, and while the bishop was in Rome, the person who had been placed in charge of the diocese thought it would be a good idea to let the sisters buy the place, and that's what happened. That's how they got a hold of the place. The bishop was out of town, and they managed to acquire the place with a loan and paid it back with no problemo. The next thing we're going to see is something that is long forgotten. It was down below Seton Hill. It was an old mine. It was Greensburg Coal's Hawksworth Mine. And there are maybe a few people around who actually might remember something about it, but not many. So the next bit of footage is going to be about what was a mine down in there below Seton Hill. And there's a place down there called Gayville, which is hardly even thought of. It's kind of like Lower Ludwig. And it was built as housing for that particular mine, the Hawksworth Mine. It's enough. Now we get a look at the Hawksworth Mine. This was the head frame and tipple with the hoist motor house back here and a siding coming off the main line. This is a Leroy Smeltzer photograph taken sometime maybe in the 20s. This mine was, they started out around 1913 and the coal ran out in 1937, so it's somewhere in that time frame. This gives locality here. This is Seton Hill. This is Ludwig. This is the main line of the railroad, and right in here where I have this orange area, this is where the mine was, the Greensburg Coal Hawksworth Mine. Now here is a bit more schematic attempt to show you. This is Seton Hill. This is the main line of the railroad. Daniels and Miller over here, right in Ludwig. This dotted line is where the main line used to run when it was first built. And in the 1890s it was relocated out here. And around 1913 or a bit after, the Hawksworth Mine was built down in here. There was also once upon a time a small railroad station out here. It was probably not much more than a whistle stop kind of place. That's another shot of the head frame and the tipple, the hoist engine building. And if you look, you can see something in the background. Back in here, that's some of the buildings up at Seton Hill. This is a page out of a book I did, and this is the head frame and tipple that we were just looking at. These are some of the other buildings. This tells stuff about the Stark construction company. They did they dug the shaft down to about 140 feet and they built the buildings. And it was the Coulters. The Coulters were invested in this. They had about 45 acres or so of coal land. These are some of the buildings associated with it. Very bad photograph. This is around 1980. Again, just trying to point out things. This little part down here called Gayville, a lot of people think of it as Ludwig, but it was separate from it. It's at a lower area, and it was built as housing for the people who worked in this mine. The name Gayville came from local real estate developers who had the last name of Gay. And that's the last shot we'll see here. This is another building that was associated with the Greensburg Coal's Hawksworth Mine. And if you look up here, you can see Seton Hill. Actually, it's a bit further off than that, but I was using a rather long telephoto lens, and it tends to compress things a bit. But it does show you that there's a relationship. It's not too far away from Seton Hill. This is a little footnote about the Hawksworth Mine. I one time met an old fellow named Nick Rouleau Sr. Nick was rather advanced in years when I was talking to him, and he was recalling when he was younger, and he was about that age when he should start working. And his brothers worked at the Hawksworth Mine, Greensburg Coal's Hawksworth Mine. And they said, well, we'll take you to work with us, and you can see what it's like working at the mine. And so Nick says he went to work with them one day. He said one day was enough. And he said he spent the rest of his life working at Walworth Valves, and he retired from there. And I can imagine that working in a coal mine like that would definitely not be a wonderful experience. But anyhow, there are people around who do that on a daily basis. So I think that's about it for this one. Okay, bye now.